going to make focaccia and you're going to learn how to do it. So we've got in my mixer, and you can do this by hand, but it's easier in a mixer. We've got 5 cups of unbleached bread flour. To that, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons and 1 teaspoon of granulated sugar and 2 teaspoons of table salt, or you can use 3.5 teaspoons of kosher salt. And we've got instant yeast, 1 packet. If you don't have the instant yeast and you have a jar of yeast, you can measure out 2¼ teaspoons of the instant yeast granules instead. All right, so I'm just gonna give that a quick mix. Whoops, gotta move that up. Hard to do this backwards. Ina Garten makes it look easy. All right, so I'm gonna mix that together, tiny bit. And then we're going to add our cool water. So I've got 2½ cups of water, which is what we want. I've got a little bit less than 2½ cups of water. I'm gonna add 3 or 4 or 5 ice cubes to it. Now I have a temperature probe here. So that's about 55 degrees, which is the temperature that I want. But if you just mix it together for a minute or 2 and the temperature isn't that critical, just don't want it too warm because we want this bread to rise very slowly. It's called a slow cold fermentation. All right, so I've got my water, 2½ cups of cool in there. And we're just going to mix that up. Now, what you can do, you can take a tea towel and tent that around there so it doesn't make a big mess. So we're gonna let that mix for 3 minutes on medium-low. Okay. All right, so that's been 3 minutes. And the dough is looking like this, very stretchy, and we're just gonna let that sit for 5 minutes and rest. We've got it on medium-low for another 3 minutes. So we're gonna take that off, scrape it down. So into my bowl, I'm gonna put 1 tablespoon of olive oil. And I'm just gonna drop my dough, which is a really sticky dough. Doesn't seem like normal bread dough. It's very, very wet. All right, I've got that all in there. Now I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil on my hands. And we're gonna do a little stretching here. We're gonna stretch this 4 times. So we're just gonna jump in, pull it up, stretch it over itself, 1/4 turn, stretch, drop it over itself, 1/4 turn, stretch, and the last one, pull it up, stretch it over itself. All right, that's good. We're gonna take the last tablespoon of olive oil for now and put that all over the top. That's it for making the dough. So we just need to cover that with plastic wrap really well. All right, so this is ready to go into the refrigerator for 8 to 10 hours or overnight, or I've left it for 2 days and it's fine, just like that. If you don't have a mixer, you can do this whole thing by hand. Just take all of your ingredients, put them in a large bowl like this, get a bowl of water next to you, and mix the dough by hand in the bowl. You won't be able to do it on a board, it's too wet. So wet your hand and mix and sort of knead the dough by hand for 3 minutes.
Let rest for 5 minutes.
And then again, we're gonna mix it by hand again for about 2 minutes. Put it in the bowl, refrigerate it overnight or 8 to 10 hours, and you're good to go. We're on to the next step. The dough has been in the refrigerator overnight, so about 24 hours for me. But as long as it's in there for about 8 hours, that's fine. Look at this dough. This is amazing. It's all bubbly and rose up to double its size. It looks awesome. All right, so I'm just going to release it from the sides of the bowl, like that. Look at the bubbles. The gluten has formed. So I've got my 13 by 18 inch pan, half sheet pan here, and I've got 2 tablespoons of olive oil, and we're just gonna spread that around in there. All right, I've got my dough, and I'm just going to release that. Looks like the blob that took over the world. And we're just going to, it's cold, it's gonna stretch that out into the pan. And focaccia has, typically has dimples in the dough, so we're just gonna start that dimpling process right now. Let this rest for 20 minutes and repeat that process so it will relax enough to stretch into the entire pan. The beautiful thing about this is that it has wonderful olive oil throughout the dough, which gets absorbed in it. So we've got another 2 tablespoons of oil that I'm just going to distribute on there. This is so delicious. You won't even believe it, but it's got such crunchiness. You're gonna love it. Okay, so I'm gonna let this sit for 20 minutes and then we're gonna stretch it out again. I've put on it another tablespoon of olive oil. I'm sorry, another 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And then we're just going to, look at all these bubbles. We're just going to gently stretch it out into all of the remaining spaces on my baking sheet. All right, that's good. Now we have to cover that. I'm gonna coat my plastic wrap with some oil so it doesn't stick. And then put that right on top. And we're gonna let that rest for about 1.5 hours to 2 hours until it fills up the pan. And then it will be ready to bake. Okay, so I've waited 2 hours and the dough was not quite risen to the top. So I set the timer for 30 minutes and set the oven temperature to 475. So we're gonna take off the plastic and it's not gonna stick that much. So I have to shut my oven off in order to change the temperature. So it was at 475 and now I'm going to put it to 450. I'm gonna put this guy in the oven. Can I do this one-handed? Yes. Okay. Put that in the oven, all bubbly and awesome looking. And we're gonna set that for 15 minutes. I forgot I was gonna sprinkle that with a teaspoon of coarse, with some coarse salt. So I'm just gonna do that real quick. So this is a little bit, this is fleur de sel. It's a little bit thicker, coarser not as fine grained as kosher salt. So you're gonna taste this on top, which is what I like, and what is typical for Ligurian. Okay, it's been 15 minutes. Look at that, it's beautiful. We're just gonna turn that around and time that for another 7. Okay, so that's been 7 minutes extra, and I can see that that's done because it is plenty brown. Okay, so we're just going to release this. This is hot, so be careful. Release this from the side of the pan. All right, so we've got it all loosened from the side of the pan. We're gonna lift that up and slide it right on to our cooling rack like this. Any of the oil that's still on the pan, you can just let go onto the focaccia. And then we're going to take our parchment paper, and that's it. We're gonna let it cool for at least 20 minutes before we get to eat this delicious, crunchy bread that you absolutely have to make because it's great. Okay, there's our focaccia. It looks amazing. And okay, all right, it's been 20 minutes. And I'm gonna slice this up, and you can see it's all airy and bubbly inside. Looks amazing. So I'm just gonna cut that up, give that a taste. It doesn't need anything. I put kind of a lot of salt on there. So so it would be great for breakfast with some cheese, or for lunch with some lunch meats, for dinner next to your spaghetti or anything like that, or just as like a dinner bread. It's just amazing. You can also do other variations. You can put some sugar and raisins on it. You could put mozzarella on top, fresh mozzarella. You could put roasted tomatoes on it. There's a lot of different things you could do. What my sons did when they were here last weekend, we had it with soup for lunch, and then while they were helping my husband put in some new windows, every hour or so, one of them would come in and take another little piece of bread. So at dinner, we had our spaghetti, and this entire bread with the 4 of us was eaten in that one day. So I hope you make this, enjoy, and see you next time. Happy cooking.